What you're about to see is the final moments of a young girl's life, captured on camera. On December 26, 2020, at exactly 12:02 a.m., 16-year-old Kalecia Williams was recording what she thought would be just another TikTok video. She was dancing, smiling, living her life. But at 12:03, someone walked into her hotel room. By 12:23, she was pronounced dead. 21 minutes. That's all it took for a Christmas celebration to turn into a nightmare that would shatter a family forever. Disclaimer: this video is meant to bring awareness to Kalecia's story and honor her memory. We mean no disrespect to her family or loved ones. Please keep them in your thoughts as we explore what happened that tragic night in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the story of Kalecia Williams, known to those who loved her as Pinky. Kalecia Williams entered this world on January 1, 2004, a New Year's baby full of promise and potential. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Kalecia was the daughter of April Smith. While her biological father's identity remains private, she was lovingly raised by her mother's partner, Ronnie Savoy, who became the father figure in her life. By 2020, Kalecia was a 16-year-old sophomore at South Atlanta High School. But to her family and friends, she wasn't just Kalecia, she was Pinky, a nickname that perfectly captured her vibrant, colorful personality. Ask anyone who knew her and they'll tell you the same thing. Pinky was full of life. She had an infectious energy that lit up every room she entered. In an era where social media defined teenage culture, Kalecia found her creative outlet on TikTok. Her account was filled with dance videos, lip-sync performances, and the kind of carefree content that millions of teenagers post every single day. She wasn't trying to become famous, she wasn't chasing clout, she was just being a teenager, dancing to trending songs, experimenting with new moves, sharing moments of joy with her online community. Her TikTok was her happy place, a digital diary of a young girl navigating high school, friendships, and growing up in modern America. Kalecia lived with her mother, April, and stepfather, Ronnie, in Atlanta. By all accounts, she was a normal teenager with normal teenage dreams. She loved spending time with friends, keeping up with the latest TikTok trends, and looking forward to the future. But 2020 had been a challenging year for everyone, including Kalecia. The COVID-19 pandemic had forced the world into lockdown. Schools closed, social gatherings stopped. For a 16-year-old in the prime of her social development, being confined to home was suffocating. Like millions of teens worldwide, Kalecia had been stuck inside for months, separated from her friends, missing out on the experiences that make high school memorable. As Christmas 2020 approached, Kalecia was eager for any opportunity to see her friends and feel like a normal teenager again, even for just one night. In mid-December 2020, Kalecia received an invitation that seemed like the perfect opportunity to break free from pandemic isolation. A school friend, a girl we'll call Infinity, invited Kalecia to a Christmas party. According to Infinity, her parents were renting an Airbnb specifically for a holiday celebration, and it would be a girls-only event. But here's what made Kalecia's parents comfortable with the idea. Infinity's mother personally reached out to April Smith and Ronnie Savoy. She assured them that she would be present throughout the entire party as a chaperone. She promised to supervise the girls, ensure their safety, and take full responsibility for the event. This isn't even the first time. According to Ronnie Savoy, they had done this arrangement once before, and everything had gone smoothly. The mother had been present, responsible, and the girls had a great time in a safe, supervised environment. "We'd done this once before, so we was a little comfortable of letting her go the second time," Ronnie later explained to the media. "And we spoke to the mother, and she said she was going to be there." For parents trying to balance safety with their daughter's mental health during a pandemic, this seemed like a reasonable compromise. The party would be at an Airbnb, chaperoned by an adult they had communicated with before. What could go wrong? April agreed. After months of isolation, her daughter deserved a night of normalcy, a chance to celebrate Christmas with friends and just be a teenager again. The chaperone had given her word. Everything seemed legitimate. The party was scheduled for December 25th, Christmas Day. The plan was for Kalecia to spend the night, which wasn't unusual for a teenage sleepover party. Her parents expected her home the next day with stories about dancing, laughing, and making memories with her friends. As Kalecia prepared to leave on Christmas evening around 8 p.m., she was excited. She was finally going to see her friends, escape the house, and have some fun. Her parents hugged her goodbye, confident in the arrangements that had been made. But what April and Ronnie didn't know, what they couldn't have known, is that nearly everything they'd been told was a lie. December 26, 2020, approximately 8 p.m., Kalecia Williams arrived at what she thought would be a Christmas party at an Airbnb, but when she got there, something was immediately wrong. She wasn't at an Airbnb at all. The location had been changed without her parents' knowledge. The party was now being held at the Hyatt Regency in downtown Atlanta. And when Kalecia arrived, her friends weren't even there yet. Confused and alone in a hotel lobby, Kalecia did what any teenager would do. She called her mother. April Smith answered the phone to hear her daughter's uncertain voice explaining that she'd arrived, but nobody else was there yet. April told her to wait, that her friends would arrive soon, and that they'd talk later. That was the last normal conversation April would ever have with her daughter. What happened over the next few hours remains somewhat unclear, but what we do know paints a disturbing picture. This was not the supervised girls-only party that had been promised. Boys were present. The adult chaperone who had personally promised Kalecia's parents she would be there was nowhere to be found, or at least was not supervising anyone. At some point during the evening, Kalecia ended up in a hotel room at the Hyatt Regency. The room was registered under the chaperone's name, but the woman who had promised to watch over these children was not doing her job. At 12:02 a.m. on December 26th, just after midnight on the day after Christmas, Kalecia was in that hotel room doing what she loved. She had her phone out and was recording a TikTok video, dancing to a popular song. For those few moments, she was just being Pinky, creating content, having fun. And then someone walked into her room. If you watch that final TikTok video, and I won't show it here out of respect for Kalecia's memory, you can see the exact moment her expression changes. The smile drops, the dancing stops, her eyes widen with what appears to be shock, maybe fear, maybe just surprise. She looks towards whoever just entered. The video cuts off abruptly. According to police reports and witness statements, the person who entered that room was a 16-year-old boy named Anthony Grant. Kalecia knew him. This wasn't a stranger breaking in. This was someone she was acquainted with, possibly someone else at the party. What happened next occurred in mere minutes. Anthony Grant and Kalecia Williams got into an argument. The exact nature of this dispute remains unclear. What started it, what was said, whether it escalated gradually or exploded suddenly, these details may never be fully known. But what is known, what was later confirmed by the suspect himself, is that during this verbal altercation, Anthony Grant pulled out a gun and he shot Kalecia Williams. The sound of gunshots echoed through the hotel room. Outside, partygoers continued their celebration,
unaware of the horror unfolding just feet away. For several minutes, nobody realized what had happened. Then, at 12:15 a.m., 25 minutes after her last TikTok video, two young men at the party discovered Kalecia on the floor of the hotel room. She was bleeding, unresponsive, barely clinging to life. In a panic, they made a decision. Rather than immediately call 911, they attempted to move her themselves. Security footage from the Hyatt Regency shows these two males carrying Kalecia's limp body through the hotel corridors. One held her under the arms, the other supported her legs. They carried her to the elevator, desperately trying to get her downstairs, perhaps to the lobby, perhaps to get her help. But Kalecia Williams was dying. At 12:27 a.m., 25 minutes after her last
TikTok video, hotel security contacted the Atlanta Police Department about a disturbance. When officers arrived at the Hyatt Regency and located Kalecia, she had no pulse. She wasn't breathing. Paramedics rushed her to a nearby hospital. Medical staff worked frantically to save the 16-year-old girl's life. They tried everything in their power. But the damage was too severe. The bullet had done too much harm. At 12:23 a.m., though some reports indicate the official time was slightly later, Kalecia Williams was pronounced dead. From her last smile on TikTok to her last breath, only 21 minutes had passed. A night that was supposed to be about celebration, about teenage fun, about finally escaping pandemic isolation, had ended in the most unimaginable tragedy. The Atlanta Police Department descended on the Hyatt Regency Hotel in the early morning hours of December 26th. What they found was a chaotic scene. Teenagers scattered throughout the hotel, some in shock, some trying to leave, others attempting to piece together what had happened. The investigation began immediately. Officers secured the hotel room where the shooting occurred. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed security footage showing the two males carrying Kalecia's body through the hotel corridors. They documented everything they could find. But one piece of evidence would prove crucial. Anthony Grant had not fled the scene. The 16-year-old suspect was still at the hotel when police arrived. Officers took him into custody and transported him to Atlanta Police Headquarters for questioning. And this is where the case took a significant turn. During interrogation, Anthony Grant confessed. According to the Atlanta Police Department spokesman, preliminary investigation suggests that the victim was inside of a room at the Hyatt Regency with a juvenile male companion. A verbal dispute occurred between both parties, which resulted in the juvenile male fatally shooting the victim. Anthony Grant admitted to shooting Kalecia Williams. He confirmed that they had gotten into a heated argument in the hotel room. He acknowledged that he had a gun, and he confessed that in the heat of that argument, he had pulled the trigger. The question that haunted investigators, the question that still haunts Kalecia's family, was simple. Why? What could a 16-year-old girl have possibly said or done to justify someone pulling a gun and taking her life? What argument could escalate so quickly, so violently, that it ended in murder within minutes? The specific details of what sparked the argument have never been fully disclosed to the public. Whether it was a personal dispute, a misunderstanding, jealousy, disrespect, or something else entirely remains partially unclear. What is clear is that Anthony Grant made a choice that night. He chose to bring a gun to a party. He chose to enter that hotel room. He chose to argue with Kalecia, and ultimately he chose to shoot her. Based on his confession and the evidence collected at the scene, Atlanta police arrested Anthony Grant and charged him with multiple serious offenses: felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm by a person under the age of 18. Because Anthony Grant was a minor, only 16 years old, his full identity has been shielded from public disclosure in most reports. Georgia law protects the identities of juvenile offenders in certain cases, though the severity of his crimes meant he would be prosecuted seriously. The case was moved to Atlanta's court system, where Anthony Grant would face trial for taking Kalecia's life. But while police had their suspect in custody and a confession on record, another investigation was unfolding, one driven not by law enforcement, but by two devastated parents demanding answers. Imagine sending your daughter to a supervised party on Christmas Day. You hug her goodbye. You tell her to have fun. You expect to see her the next morning, tired but happy, full of stories about the night. Now imagine learning that your daughter is dead 8 hours after she took her last breath. That's what happened to April Smith and Ronnie Savoy. Kalecia Williams was pronounced dead at approximately 12:23 a.m. on December 26th. Her parents didn't receive notification until 8:45 a.m. that same morning. 8 hours. 8 hours during which their daughter's body lay in a morgue while they slept, unaware that their lives had been destroyed. The call didn't come from the chaperone who had promised to watch over Kalecia. It didn't come from the police. It came from the morgue itself. Like, "This is the morgue." And I was like, "The morgue?" They was like, "Yes, ma'am." They was like, "Well, we're waiting on your daughter's body to come through." I'm like, whoa. Can you imagine receiving that phone call? One moment you're a parent waiting for your teenager to come home. The next moment you're being told by a morgue that they're waiting for your child's body. The devastation was compounded by betrayal. Nothing about that night had been what April and Ronnie were promised. The hotel room wasn't an Airbnb. It was at a hotel. It wasn't girls only. Boys were present, boys with guns. And, most egregiously, the adult chaperone who had personally assured them she would supervise the party had failed in every possible way. The hotel room was in her name, so I feel like she should be held accountable for my daughter's death as well, April stated bluntly to reporters. The questions tormented them. How did boys get into what was supposed to be a girls' party? How did a 16-year-old bring a gun to a hotel party without any adult noticing? Where was the chaperone when Kalecia was shot? Why did it take 8 hours for them to be notified? And, most painfully, what happened between 12:02 a.m. when Kalecia posted her last TikTok and 12:23 a.m. when she was declared dead? 21 minutes, a lifetime compressed into 21 minutes, and Kalecia's parents had been denied any information about what happened during that time until hours later. Their anger wasn't just directed at Anthony Grant, the boy who pulled the trigger. It extended to the chaperone who failed to supervise, to the hotel that allowed this situation to unfold, to every person and institution that should have protected their daughter but didn't. April and Ronnie made a decision. They would fight not just for justice in the criminal case against Anthony Grant, but for accountability from everyone who had failed Kalecia that night. They organized protests outside the Hyatt Regency Hotel, joined by supporters, community members, and other parents who couldn't fathom how such a tragedy could occur at what was supposed to be a supervised teenage party. Their message was clear. Anthony Grant may have pulled the trigger, but he wasn't the only one responsible for Kalecia's death. The chaperone who lied about supervision, the hotel that failed to maintain security, the system that allowed a 16-year-old to bring a gun to a party, they all played a role in the sequence of failures that ended Kalecia's life. As news of Kalecia Williams' murder spread throughout Atlanta and eventually across the nation, the community's response was one of heartbreak and outrage. How does a Christmas party end in murder? How does a supervised event turn deadly? How does a 16-year-old die while under the supposed care of a responsible adult? Kalecia's story resonated particularly in the Black community, where parents face the constant fear of gun violence claiming their children's lives. Here was yet another young Black life cut short, another family destroyed, another future erased. Social media exploded with tributes to Kalecia. Her TikTok videos, which had once been simply entertainment, became memorial tributes. People who had never met Kalecia shared her story, watched her dance videos with tears in their eyes, and demanded justice for Pinky. The case also sparked larger conversations about teenage safety, gun violence, and parental responsibility. How many other parties like this were happening? How many chaperones were failing to actually supervise? How many other teenagers had access to guns that they brought into social situations? Local news outlets covered the story extensively. National media picked it up. Kalecia's face appeared on screens across America, a beautiful 16-year-old girl whose life was stolen in the span of 21 minutes. The Atlanta community rallied around April Smith and Ronnie Savoy. The protests outside the Hyatt Regency grew. Supporters demanded not just criminal prosecution of Anthony Grant, but civil accountability from the hotel and the negligent chaperone.
Legal experts began discussing potential lawsuits. Could the family sue the hotel for failing to maintain adequate security? Could they sue the chaperone for gross negligence? What recourse did parents have when the people they trusted with their child's safety failed so catastrophically? For April and Ronnie, the criminal case against Anthony Grant was important, but it wasn't enough. He would face trial for murder, that was certain, but what about everyone else who had played a role in creating the circumstances that led to Kalecia's death? She should be held accountable, April repeated in multiple interviews, referring to the chaperone, the woman who had looked her in the eye and promised to watch over Kalecia, who had assured them it would be a safe, supervised girls' party, who had taken responsibility for these children's well-being. Where was she when Kalecia needed protection? The fight for complete justice, for full accountability from everyone involved, was just beginning, and April and Ronnie made it clear they would not rest until every person and institution that failed their daughter answered for what happened that night. In the aftermath of tragedy, families face an impossible challenge. How do you honor a life cut short? How do you ensure your child is remembered for who they were, not just how they died? For April Smith and Ronnie Savoy, keeping Kalecia's memory alive became a mission. They wanted the world to know Kalecia Williams, not as a murder victim, not as a statistic, but as Pinky, the vibrant 16-year-old who loved to dance, who dreamed of the future, who brought joy to everyone around her. Kalecia's funeral was held in early January 2021. Friends, family, classmates, and community members gathered to celebrate her life and mourn her death. They shared memories of her infectious laugh, her dance moves, her kindness. They watched her TikTok videos and remembered the girl who had created them with such joy and innocence. But even in
grief, there was anger. Anger at the senselessness of it all. Anger that a simple Christmas party had ended in death. Anger that so many people had failed to protect a child. The family established memorials in Kalecia's honor. Her TikTok account became a digital memorial, preserved exactly as she left it, her final video standing as a haunting reminder of how quickly life can be taken. In Atlanta, community organizations began using Kalecia's story to advocate for stricter gun control, better youth intervention programs, and increased accountability for adults who supervise teenage events. Kalecia's case also prompted discussions in schools about the dangers of unsupervised parties, the prevalence of guns among teenagers, and the importance of honest communication between parents and chaperones. For April and Ronnie, no amount of advocacy or justice would bring their daughter back. But if Kalecia's story could prevent even one other family from experiencing this nightmare, if it could save even one other child's life, then perhaps some meaning could be found in the tragedy. Kalecia Pinky Williams was 16 years old when her life was stolen from her. She died doing something she loved, creating content, dancing, being herself. One moment she was smiling at her camera. The next, she was gone. As of now, Anthony Grant's case continues through the Atlanta court system. The family's fight for accountability from the chaperone and the hotel continues. The pain of losing Kalecia will never diminish. 21 minutes. That's all it took to destroy a family, end a young life, and create a tragedy that would ripple through an entire community. If you're a parent, have conversations with your children about gun violence. Ask questions about the parties they attend. Verify that chaperones will actually be present and supervising. Don't take anyone's word at face value. If you're a teenager, understand that guns have no place at social gatherings. Understand that arguments can be walked away from. Understand that your life and your friends' lives are precious and irreplaceable. And if you're an adult who agrees to supervise young people, take that responsibility seriously. Parents are trusting you with their most precious gift, their children. Don't betray that trust. Kalecia's family continues to seek justice and answers. They continue to fight for accountability, and they continue to honor Pinky's memory by ensuring her story is told. Rest in peace, Kalecia Williams. You deserved so much more than 21 minutes. If you found this video meaningful, please share it to spread awareness about Kalecia's story. Be kind to one another, and remember, every life is precious and every moment matters. We'll see you in the next video.